All right, what we're going to do here, we're going to take this image of a t-shirt I took, just a random image. You can take any image you want. Now, there's no graphic on the t-shirt. If there was, I'd have to get rid of it. And once again, ideally to work with flat images or images that are concept mock-ups that don't have anything on them. So they're just blank, which is great. That's the best way to do it. Anyways, I've taken this picture, I've fixed it up a little bit with adjustments, but here I just have the flat version of it. What I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure that I could change the color of the t-shirt and that I can also put any graphic on at any time in a few different ways. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So first, what I'm going to do, I always like to click off of the lock and I'm going to Command J and duplicate that layer. This layer will be my original. I always like to keep the original pixel, the original information there, which is great. And I'm just going to shut that off. Now this is going to be more or less my background layer. And what I'll do, I'm going to duplicate this again as well. And this is going to be my t-shirt, or I'm just going to say shirt base. It's going to be the base of it. What I need to do now is I need to mask out the shirt in a really, really good way because I'm going to reuse that mask many, many times. So I need to do a good job with masking it properly or cutting it out. And the one I'm going to use the select subject, and then I'm just going to fine tune that. If you can't find that there, you could open up your properties here, or you can go to select and subject. And then we could do that, or click here, either way, and there I go. Now, there are some parts of this I want and don't want. Clearly, I don't want the coat hanger. I strictly want as much of the shirt as possible, nothing else. So what I'll do is I will click on my shirt. I'm on this layer. I'm going to have that selection. I'm going to go to my quick selection tool and I'm just going to redefine the selection. And I love the quick selection tool because it's just more or less I'm brushing on a selection or actually brushing away a selection. So by default, the brush is plus. So I'm going to add to the selection, but I don't want that. I actually want to get rid of some of the selection. So to change the quick selection tool to subtraction, it's going to take away. I could either go up here and do that or hold down the Option key or Alt key on a PC and just click away, click and brush away the selection I don't want. So I don't want the coat hanger. And as I get closer there, Photoshop starts to recognize what I do and don't want. Now what I'm going to do, I am going to zoom in a little bit more. Now I will eventually have to get rid of this bar as well, which I'll do shortly after. I'll do that on the mask. But what I want to do now, I really want to fine tune my my selection here and make sure I get as much of the shirt as possible, not the background. So as I shrink down my brush using the keyboard commands, keyboard shortcuts of open bracket and close bracket, open bracket makes it smaller, close bracket makes it larger. Of course I could right, no, actually I can't right click there. I'd have to do it here and change up the size of it right here. But I like to use my keyboard shortcuts. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add in some of this. And as I'm clicking and dragging down, as I let go of the click, Photoshop kind of redefines that selection for me. So I'm just going to once again just click and drag a little bit. If I go over, not a problem, because then I could just fix that up. So I'm just going to go along the perimeter of the shirt and make sure I get kind of the best selection for me. Now here I had a little bit of duct tape to help me when I took this picture. So now I'm going to hold on Option just to get rid of that. So that's not a part of the selection anymore. So you can really fine tune whatever selection you have. Once again, it all depends on the picture you have. Maybe your picture, when you did the select subject, it worked really, really, really well. And that's fine. So either way, it's always a good idea to go through this because once again, the idea we're trying to present it, we're trying to make it as realistic as possible. And by doing that, that good mask, that good selection will help us kind of show that. So I'm just going to clean this up a little bit. Obviously, Photoshop did a very good job of finding everything here. So I'm really happy with that. It makes my life a lot easier. Now I'm getting a little technical, a little too close, a little too detailed on some of these. I'm fine with it. Generally, it's pretty good. Yeah, they look pretty good. They actually turned out quite well. So once again, Photoshop did an excellent job with the select subject and really found the spaces I need here for my shirt. Good. So I kind of cut out that coat hanger or the hanger there. Realistically, these kind of two come together, so probably I should remove a little bit of that. Now, once again, because my brush is so small, Photoshop understands that I'm trying to really fine tune it, which is fine. And I'm looking pretty good there. I'm happy with that. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to mask this out and I'm just going to keep it simple here. I'm just going to, because I have my selection, I'm on my shirt base, I'm going to click on the mask option and it's going to mask it out. So if I shut that off, I'm just masked out. So my shirt looks great. It's selected. Awesome. So I'm going to bring back my background. Now what I want to do is I want to duplicate this. Actually, not just yet though. I will duplicate it. What I want to do first, just to make sure, I'm going to get rid of this part. Actually, let me show you here. So I'm going to get rid of this part of the, on the mask this part out. So I'm going to click on the mask. I'm going to make sure my foreground is white. I'm going to select the polygonal tool, the polygonal lasso tool. If you can't find it, it's under the lasso tool. And I'm just going to select a rough area. Because the polygonal lasso tool makes straight lines, I'm just going to click and drag, or not click and drag, just click and click and click, and it finds it. And that's all I'm going to do here. I'm just going to press delete, and now it deletes that part, which I don't want. If I bring back the background, it all looks correct. So I'm only masked the shirt. Only the shirt is selected, which is great. So now what I want to do, I'm going to duplicate this now. So Command J and Command J. What I want to do, I'm going to make sure that the first one I made, I'm going to call it the shadow layer. And the top one I'm going to call the highlight layer. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure that I can see these above the color I'm about to make. And that way I can now put any color I want, and the original tones, the values, the lights and darks of the shirt will always remain intact. Now this is the way I like to do it. So what I'm going to do also, I'm going to select both of those by holding down Command or Shift, Command G, and I can group those layers, and I'm just going to call these shirt, highlight, and shadow. All right. So now I'm going to go back in. Now these need to be specific parameters to these. So the shadow layer is going to have a blending mode of multiply. So it's going to keep those darker tones. And the highlight layer is going to have, it could be either one you want, or you can play around with it. I'm going to click on hard light. Linear light also works. But I'm also going to bring down the opacity to roughly about 20%. But you'll see when we play around with it what I'm actually doing when I do that. You'll see how this all works out. So I'm just going to highlight. Come on. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to put those there like that. It's all grouped together quite nicely. And now what I can do, I am going to drag out any shape layer, probably a rectangle obviously, and I'm just going to cover the shirt. I can make it this big, it doesn't matter. I just want to cover the shirt, click and drag. I cover the shirt, and I'm going to make it any color I want. And remember, I'm above the shirt base layer, not above the shirt highlight and shadow layer. And what I'll do, I'm just going to take this and color any color I want. Let's just go red for now. And I want these pixels only to show through this layer. So I'm going to make a clipping mask. So with hovering over, I'm going to make sure that shape layer was above my shirt base layer. I'm going to hold down Option, and I'm going to hover between the two layers, and I'm going to click. Now that my cursor's turned into, ready to make the clipping mask layer, I'm going to click, and now I've made a clipping mask, and now there it is. That's what my shirt looks like. Great. So what I can do, just to show you what these shadow and highlight layers did, I'm going to shut them off. So now this is normally what is seen. I have my shirt, which acts as the area where the color will go. So it's only in this area, showing through this area. And now if I add my shadow layer, those are my shadows, and that looks great. That looks great on its own. What I've done with the highlight layer is I've added in hard light, and I tried to bring down 20%, which I didn't. I think I did, but it just didn't take. And now what I can do with that is I can punch up those highlights. Now if I go too much, clearly it's going to wash out the shirt. It's going to wash out that natural hue that I had there. So if I bring it down, I can kind of play around with really roughly where my highlights are going to be, which I'm kind of happy with that. Once again, if I go to linear light, a little bit brighter, I can kind of play around with those too and see where I want to be with those colors. Doesn't really matter. It's up to you how you want to play with that. And once again, your picture, the one you choose, the one you play around with, might be something different. So you play around with those options, the opacity of something lighter or something darker. And I think that works out pretty good. So I'm happy with that. And these are going to be colors. I'm just going to call this one red. What I'm going to do with these two, I'm going to group these together, and this is going to be the shirt color. So if I ever gave this to somebody, they weren't 100% on Photoshop, how it works, I would just say, here's the file. Here's where you change your shirt color. And once again, I can make as many shirt colors as I want. Command J, Command J. I'm going to make those. I'll change this to a different color. Actually, let me shut this off so I can actually see what the color is. Nice color there. Whatever. And double click on this one. Let me open it, turn it on, and I'll see what kind of interesting color I got here. Cool. All right. So once again, I can say, yeah, I have a, what's this, maybe potentially violet, or a blue, and this one, maybe potentially turquoise. And once again, you can play around with as many colors as you want. You have 20 colors here, one color, and just change it over and over and over. It's entirely up to you. That's great. So I'm set with that. I'm good. Now the last thing I want to do is I want to be able to place a graphic on here. Now the quickest way for me to do that is I'm going to make a new layer from a shape. I'm going to make a shape layer. I'm going to use the pen tool to create that. Now by default, potentially you're going to make a path. I don't want to make a path. I actually want to make a shape because I want this. I'm going to convert this to a smart object. Inside that smart object, I can place anything I want. So I'm going to click on shape, make sure that the pen tool is on shape, and I'm just going to, I'm going to make a quick, really quick outline, a rough perimeter of the t-shirt. And this really, that's all I'm doing is making myself a guide. The guide is going to allow me to know where roughly the logo or whatever I'm going to put on this t-shirt will apply or will show up. That's it. Very, very simple. Now, if I want to, I can get rid of the fill and just make it a stroke. And I'll just have a stroke outline, which will give me an ideal option as well for a guide. I could do that. Or I could say no stroke and I'll just give it a quick little fill. Does not matter the color because you're going to get rid of it anyways. Let's just say it's black for now. Does not matter. This is just a guide. So I'm going to do it that way. So there I go. Now that I've made my guide, I've set this up. I'm going to right click on the layer and convert it to a smart object. Now anything I put inside this smart object container will fit in here and it will kind of flow a little bit with the wrinkles, but I'm going to do one next step to add that in. So I'm going to double click on my smart object and now I'm inside the smart object. It opens up in a new container and the smart object container shape 1 PSB. Now I'll probably name that later better. And that's all I have to do now. I'm going to go into Illustrator. I'm going to bring in a vector. You can bring in a raster, copy and paste from Photoshop, doesn't matter. I'm just going to bring in a vector from Illustrator. I'm in Illustrator. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to bring it in to my smart object container, Command V. I'm going to make it a smart object as well. I'm just going to place it. I can make it big, small, doesn't matter. It's a smart object, so it's going to remember all those original pixels. And I can shut this layer off now because I know where the position is now. If I wanted to put this up here, well, I know it'll fit in here because that's roughly the outline. Doesn't matter. I'm just going to save it, Command S. If I go, I don't even have to close this. If I want to close it, I can, but I'm going to work with it a little bit more. I could open it and that's where it shows up. That's great. Perfect. Once again, if I go back to my smart object or my container, I'm going to open this back on just so I see where it's going to go, roughly there. I shut it off, Command S again, or File Save, and now it shows up there. Great, and it works really well. It looks like it fits on that shirt. Now, of course, can I change up the color of the shirt to make it work a little bit better? Let me maybe make this violet a different color, more of a darker tone, so my particular graphic can really pop out a little bit better. Cool, and now it's not really violet anymore, but that's okay. And now that works out quite well. That's good. Now, once again, can I play around with the actual smart object? Let me put this into, I'm going to, actually, you know what I'll do just to be on the safe side? I'm going to open this up. I'm going to save it and close it. I'm going to call this my shirt graphic. Great. And I'm also, because I love my group layers, I'm going to group that one layer and just call this once again the shirt graphic. Great. And I'll even take these bottom ones and just call this my base because it's my background and my original. So there I go. Great. Now I have this all, I'm more or less done, which I'm happy with that, but I'm going to go one step further just to show you a couple things that might occur. So I'm going to take this graphic and once again, I'm going to put it here, but what if I wanted this graphic kind of like to come off a little bit, like that's where it would go, or if I wanted it up here, or if I wanted it up there. Let's do two. I'm going to duplicate this and put it up here too. Let's just pretend. So what I'm going to do, and I'll put an extra one over here too, just to show you if it goes off, what happens. I'm going to shut this off. I'm going to save it. I'm going to go back to my original, and now you see it's like, oh, okay, that's kind of weird, and it's not really realistic because obviously that would never happen. So what I can do now instead is I already have it. I'm going to mask this out. I'm going to mask out this smart object, and because I already have the mask here, it's just going to hide the things I don't need, which is this and this. So what I can do, I'm just going to take this mask. I'm going to hold down Option and I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to click and drag, holding down Option. I can see my cursor turn into a double cursor. I'm going to bring it up to my smart object and just drop it on. And there I go. Now it's masked out the parts that I don't want. And because it was that great mask I made, I'm looking pretty good. Well, there's still one extra little problem. It did a good job here and a good job here, but not here. Obviously, it wouldn't go over like that. That's okay. I'll click on this mask that I just brought on, and I'm going to mask out a little bit more. I'm going to hide some extra pixels. So I'm going to click on my brush tool, make sure I'm painting black to hide, make sure you're on your mask, and just start painting. Bring my brush a little bit bigger, Great. I do have a hard edge brush because I don't want a soft edge. And I'll come really close to it. I could do a better job. I could zoom in closer if I want to make it really, really good. And I'm gonna press X. If I press X, it toggles between me painting black or painting white. So it toggles between the foreground and background. So I'm gonna paint back just a little bit here because I messed up. Once again, I could always fix that. That's a great thing about the mask. And that's it. Now I'm all set. That looks pretty good. If I go back to that smart object, I will save and close that. I will double click on it again. There it is. And I could just click that back on, remove these because I don't really need them. I'll bring this back. Maybe I'll do this little option here, shrink it down, Command T to free transform, or edit free transform and transform as well. Shut this off and save and go back. Great, that's it. Very simple. Well, the last part of this I want to show you is using the displacement method to help the actual graphic kind of move along with the lights and darks of this, the concave and convex parts of the wrinkles. And now obviously, yes, I took a picture of a shirt. Maybe I should have ironed it, but there's a reason why I did that. So I get really strong wrinkles, and I want to show you what it does. I'm going to go back here one last time. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so we can see kind of how it goes. There we go. Make it really big. Great. Shut this off. My guide, I no longer need it. Command S, and I'm back here. Great. So what I'm going to do a little bit of a displacement, but I'm going to use this method of using the channels to create the displacement map. I need to make a map of it first, the lights and darks. So the lighter lights and dark darks will help form whatever graphic you have to the wrinkles here. So how do we do this? Number one, I'm going to shut off my graphic. I can shut off the layer or shut off the entire group, doesn't matter. Done. I'm going to go now to my channels layer, panel I should say, channels panel, under window. And here is my channels panel. What I want to do, I want to find the RGB, one of them, the red, the green, or the blue that has the best contrast. Then I'm going to play with it a little bit more. So this one is a little too light, not too, a lot of midtones, not too dark darks or light lights. This one's pretty good. Darks are pretty decent, and the lights are okay. The red, a little bit darker, so not a huge difference. So you know what? I'm going to choose the red. On this red channel, what I'm going to find, I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to duplicate the channel. So I duplicate it. And the way that the displacement map works, it needs to be grayscale. So this is going to be grayscale. It needs to be blurred out, and it needs to, once again, have high lights, like very light lights, and dark darks. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to name the channel Displace. I always name this wrong. And I'm going to put it on a new document. So it's not going to add a new channel here. It's going to add a new tab, so a new document, and then add the new channel there. And I'm going to, once again, I'm going to call the actual new PSD Displace, and I'm just going to say okay, and there it is. My new tab showed up with a new document. It has one channel called Displace, but the issue is I do want to make this lighter and darker, so I'm going to need to make some adjustments. Maybe add an adjustment layer. Well, the problem is it doesn't allow me. That's okay. We'll go to Image Mode, and right now it was on multi-channel. It only allowed me to bring this into a new document, and it gave me the multi-channel option and mode. Well, that's okay. But once again, multi-channel gives me limited options to play in Photoshop, so I'm going to make it grayscale. And now it's grayscale, nothing changed in value. I have the grayscale on my channel, I can shut that off. And now if I look, I can add adjustments. I'm going to add, let's say, a level adjustment. And with that level adjustment, what I'm going to do, I'm going to try to make my darker darks and light lights. So I'm going to bring over my black stop and bring it over a little bit, see if I can get some darker darks. And my white, once again, I'm going to try to find those light lights, and I need to find a little compromise between my dark darks and light lights. The middle gray stop kind of plays with the gray tones, the mid tones. So I'm just going to try to find that there, roughly pretty good. Now this is one part of it. Once again, I'm trying to find those light lights, dark darks. Now the next part, let's pretend I'm happy with that. I can always come back to this and play around. Once again, it's a PSD. I'm going to save it, and this will be saved. I can come back and play around with it. The next part of this, I'm going to click on the t-shirt actual layer. Don't even worry about the lock. I'm going to go up to Filter and Blur and Gaussian Blur. So now I'm going to make it even more so where I have just focusing on my light lights and dark dark values. And there I am, roughly right about there. That's pretty good. If I go too far, obviously it doesn't really help. If I don't do much, maybe it's going to really work with some of these as well. Maybe I just want to focus on those bigger wrinkles, the bigger spots, and roughly, let's say, right about there. Okay. And if I go back to my levels, can I play with those light lights again a little bit more? Sure. Let's try that. See what happens. Okay. So now I'm going to save this. save as, and I'll just save it on my desktop as displace.psd because it only will work as a PSD. I'm going to save it. Great. So this is saved. This is great. I'm going to go back to my t-shirt. And that's all I have to do. I'm going to click back on my normal channel. So if I just click on a color or anything, or I can go to my channel panel and make sure that I'm back on the full RGB so I can see everything. Now back on my smart object, my graphic, I am going to add the displacement. Now because it's a smart object, I'm going to add the displace method as a smart filter, meaning I could always turn it on and off and play around with it. So it's a smart object. I'm going to finish off the displacement method by adding the displacement map to this smart object. So I'm going to go to filter and distort and displace. Now it asks me, how do you want the pixels to move? If the dark areas and the light areas, it can move 8 pixels side to side or 8 pixels up and down. I'm going to show you a few different options. We're going to start with 10. So meaning the pixels will either move 10 pixels to the left and right, or 10 and up and down, the vertical scale and the horizontal scale. If I do very few, it's only going to move a little bit. If I do a lot, it's going to move a lot more. I'm going to show you a few different options here. I'm going to say okay with the 10. Then it says, okay, you want to move them that way, but what map do you want to use? What displacement map? I want to use this as my displacement map. That this is how the smart object is going to conform to and how it's going to distort. I say open, and then that's it. It's done. It added it. Now you may or may not be able to tell what it did, so let's kind of take a look at that. So my displacement, once again, I added a smart filter as my displacement. I could always go back and fix it. So let's shut it off and see what it did. Did it help conform to the curves a little bit? Kind of, not too bad. It did a decent job. Could have done a better job, but once again, we're not done there. Let's say it did a pretty decent job. I'm kind of happy with the way it flowed a little bit. Let's push it a little bit further. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to Command J this twice just to show you a couple options. I'm going to go back to this filter. I'm going to shut this one off. And this time with this displacement, I'm going to double click on displace, and what it does, it brings me right back to my original settings of that filter. This time I'm just going to say, let's do 5. Let's just subtly change it and see what happens. I'll say, okay, it wants that displacement map again, not a problem, exact same one, great. And once again, it did a pretty good job of moving it. It did a little bit less this time compared to this one. If I focus down here, maybe on this line, this curve, this wrinkle, this one was 10, this one is 5. If I even put them side by side, it didn't really make a huge difference. Okay, let's do one more. I'll double click. Sorry, not on the smart object, not what I want. I'm going to drop down here. I'm going to go back to displace, and I am going to double click on displace. This time I'm going to go 20. Let's really see what a lot more pixels changes can do. And once again, we're keeping an eye on here, see what happens. We'll say okay. Find that displace map again that I already made, same one. And now we see how it kind of bends a little bit more to the light areas, and the dark areas it kind of goes in a little bit. So even though the graphic itself gets a little more pixelated in these areas because it's really stretching them, it actually gives it a little bit more realism as to what is actually happening with those curves. So it kind of works with it a little bit better. Once again, compared to this or compared to this, how it moves or not. Actually, I believe this displace is currently off. Yeah, I'm not really seeing it that well. So what I'm focusing on here is this little wrinkle here, compared to this wrinkle, which is not much, but once again, the exaggerated compared to that wrinkle, which is a lot more. So the displacement map does work, it does a good job. Now the other thing I can do, of course, with my shape, my smart object, I should say, is I'm just gonna get rid of these. I don't need them. I'm going to, let's play around with the blending mode potentially. So I'm gonna go to normal. I'm just gonna scroll through. Now these ones will obviously make it darker, which is potentially what I don't want. These ones will make it lighter, which once again didn't really do a huge difference. And these ones will just add more contrast. That kind of does something interesting there too, based on the colors, based on the RGB channels, based on the light pixels and dark pixels of the above layer and the below layer. So how it actually blends in is kind of interesting. I'm going to keep it normal because potentially there's one you might find where you want to pick up a little bit more texture of the shirt, if the shirt has a little more texture, whatever the case is. Or of course you can do a blend if option. You could double click on the smart object, go down to your blend if, and play around here, which once again, because of your other layers with your highlights and shadows, you might not need to do this, but you can play around with the darker areas. It kind of blends in a little bit. Once again, does the ink of the shirt, if this was really made, really pop like this? Or does it blend in a little bit more on the lights and darks? Or does it not? I'm holding down Option to break the stops because if I too much, it'll just get rid of it. And those are the underlying darks, which the shirt generally right now is quite dark. So we could play around with those as well, but once again, it all depends on the graphic you chose. It depends on the underlying layer, if it's a shirt, if you choose to do something else and try to mock up whatever else, it all depends on how you're gonna play with that. So either way, I'm just gonna press OK. And this is it. So what I did, just to recap, I grabbed my base layer, duplicated it, so now I have my background, but I also have my original pixels if I ever need them. I created a mask, I added some colors, and those colors went inside of the clipping mask, so now they only pertain to these pixels that are showing through. I made a shadow and highlight layer so I could always make sure I get the dimension or the quality of the form of the shirt to show through. And then I made a graphic layer, a smart object, and now I can bring anything into that smart object. I double click and I can bring in something else. Let me do one more. So this is a great way to do many different versions of a logo, of whatever, try out a bunch of different options. And let's see how that goes. That's roughly where it's going to show up. I'm going to bring that over here, whatever the case is. Press enter, shut that off. Come in. Once again, I can have as many logos in here as I want. Smart object will hold them. And I don't even have to save the smart object in a special place. I can just save it, close it, done. And there I go. And then that's kind of how it shows. And once again, because I did that 20, it really flows with it much nicer than just the 10 or the 4 or the 5 or whatever you choose to do with your displacement. Can I go back to my displacement and fix it up even more? Of course. Save it and bring it back in. So this is how it works. Hope that helped out creating a concept for something not so difficult, but a little more challenging than just a flat square if it was a billboard or a wall poster or a magazine. So there you go.